esteemed Vice Chancellor Professor K.R.S. Rao, esteemed Pro-Vice Chancellor Professor J.K. Patnaik, our today's guest speakers, Professor Palumia Sailu, Professor Ravindra Kumar Mohanty, Professor Sanjay Kumar, Dr. A. Shyam Kishore, my esteemed colleagues. Today, Mizoram University is celebrating International Day of Non-Violence. United Nations in the year 2007 decided that this day, October 2nd, birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, should be celebrated as International Day of Non-Violence. In fact, this year is very significant. 2007 marked 100 years of one of the important milestones of Gandhian activities in South Africa. In Transvaal, they have this particular act, very atrocious act against Asian migrants, and they were tortured and they were not given any kind of facility because they were the immigrants. So as Gandhiji by that time was into the legal profession, initially he wanted to start this resistance, peaceful resistance. Then this particular time, 1907, he started that satyagraha against that atrocious law of South Africa, and 2007 marked 100 years of that non-violent protest by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi, our father of the nation. So when United Nations started this, entire world celebrate this day. When we celebrate as Gandhi Jayanti, and later on Shastri Jayanti was added to that, entire world celebrates as International Day of Non-Violence. Government of India, many agencies, they are celebrating. Honorable Governor, requested our Honorable Vice Chancellor that Mizoram University should organize some meeting on the occasion of International Day of Non-Violence. Even though the letter is late, I am grateful to all of you that because of instant cooperation, consent, today evening we had another online program. We could assemble here, and as we all listen to Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, that he is here already 3 hours, because this is a day of remembrance. It's a day of sacrifice. It's a day of knowing our country's history, tradition, legacy of freedom struggle, legacy of Mahatma Gandhi, truth, non-violence and peace. So I do not want to linger my speech. Only on behalf of the university, it's a proud privilege on my part to welcome all the guests, including Vice Chancellor Sir, Pro-Vice Chancellor Sir, my esteemed guest speakers and all my colleagues, so that today we can celebrate International Day of Non-Violence. So the program is like this. Each guest speaker will speak for 10 minutes. I have already talked to them. They have been assigned a specific topic within the generic topic of non-violence. They will speak. Professor Sanjay Hindi में बोलेंगे. All others will speak in English, and there is no language bar. As a central university, Hindi is also a mandate. We can also, because when you go there near PVC's that office, a board was there. Today's word, English, Hindi translation. We have a Hindi sale also. Recently we celebrated Hindi Pakhwada, Hindi Fortnight. So Hindi is part of us. So Professor Sanjay will speak in Hindi, others in English. So before the panelists, the guest speakers speak, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor to speak a few words, then it will continue. First, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Rao to speak a few words. Sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. It was a day remembrance of Mahatma Gandhi ji and Lal Bahadur Shastri ji. As you know that India is well known for whole world. It is a country of non-violence. movement. And India's non-violence movement has been well appreciated throughout the world. And India has been in the news for several years and in several countries about its non-violence movement has been initiated in such a way that India has got the independence finally because of that non-violence movement. And before India's non-violence movement, even Mahatma Gandhi ji has been in the news as mentioned by our Professor Pati, that in 1893 when Indians first entered into South Africa, in 1893 with 340 people, a ship has been landed in South Africa with tea workers. And it was been a memorable, that is a miserable situation for Indians, that they have been ill-treated and they have not been given in admissions in schools and not been treated them as human beings for almost several years. So in between 1893 to 1914, actually Indians have been struggled very well, and Mahatma Gandhi ji also has landed in South Africa in the year 1893, and he has started his struggle for existence movement in South Africa and in the form of a non-violence movement. And he has continued till 1914, till he comes back to India. And he has continued this struggle, and in South Africa now people are living very freely. More than 1.5 million people are living in South Africa, and they are all being given all kind of facilities, and people are now living with all voting rights and election rights and everything they were given. All Indians memorizes the India's freedom movement, and they are given equal status for with all the citizens. Now after that, India has also been initiated this non-violence movement under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi ji, and finally we got the independence in the 1947 August 15th, and we are celebrating today the 75th independence of India. And it was really memorable, and this India's movement, freedom movement, has been very well appreciated throughout the world, and even today also many countries they memorize this particular freedom movement. And it is an occasion that being being an Indian, we should be proud of that, and that movement has been limelighted in the whole world, and we are known for that non-violence, and also we are known for fighting peacefully and get the independence. This is what actually India has got a track record of many milestones like this, and I am very happy that we are celebrating this particular non-violence movement as one of the occasion here, and we invited 4 speakers there to speak about non-violence. They are specialists in that particular area. I take my chance to say that thanks to them, because I am not a competent person to say lengthy speech about non-violence, but whatever I had in my mind, but our Gandhiji has been well appreciated and well that is worshipped in many countries. We have Gandhi statues not only in India. We have Gandhi statues in South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Panama, and all Latin American countries, all African countries. We have Gandhi statues. This is what actually many people doesn't know, that Gandhi statue only there in India, but in many countries, African countries and Eastern countries, they have, even in UK and Europe also, there are many Gandhi statues are being established, and they actually worship him like anything. This is what actually everybody has to understand this. Okay, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to say a few words, and we pray that homage to the great leaders of Mahatma Gandhi and Lal Bahadur Shastri. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I request Professor J.K. Patnaik, our Pro Vice Chancellor, to speak a few words.
Thank you, Professor Patil, Honorable Vice Chancellor. Dear colleagues, I am very happy that I have been given a chance to speak on a topic that is universally known to many people in India. I'll sit down. I'm not feeling it. I need to lean on. For the people of India, the concept of non-violence is not alien. It's Indian alien. And it is very much partly deeply rooted in the Indian ethos. Mahatma Gandhi was the person who for the first time brought it into focus by making it a mass movement. As Professor Patil has already said that way back in 2007, when the then External Affairs Minister of the state moved the resolution in the United Nations, more than 140 countries simply supported the resolution to have this International Day of Non-Violence. Actually, non-violence, the concept of non-violence is deeply embedded in the Indian civilization and Indian religion. And this is part of, when we say religion, I don't think in the sense people mean today in the sense of organized religion, but in the sense a way of life, in a sense a set of belief system which is really practicable. In order to pursue one's goal of self-realization, individuals are provided with a set of canons. And one of the canons, many rishis, pandits have really advocated different kinds of theories. I'm talking about the ancient seers. But one among them is, the leading one is and has been, is and has been and will be also Patanjali Shastri. And some people say that there was not one Patanjali Shastri, but there are a number of Patanjali Shastri. Anyway, when he advocated or exploited the Ashtanga Marga, the first step, the first organ of that is Niyam. Jama, Niyam, second. Jama is the first one. Yama. In that, there are 5 categories, 5 elements. The first element is Satya. Second is Ahimsa. Then Brahmacharya. And Gandhiji, being deeply religious and having had his childhood training in Hindu religion. Hindu is again a bit, is not a religion in the sense people mean today. It is not an organized religion, and it is not a belief system that is generally understood by others as it is. So Gandhi was, since childhood, exposed to the deeper meanings of the religion, and especially the fundamental canon of this religion, that is Satya and Ahimsa. And he wanted to put into practice and experimentations. And when he did his experimentation on truth, in his book, My Experiments with Truth, he thought that this can be a weapon, a potent weapon, to uproot and banish the subjugation from the colonial masters. And that, in a sense, reached the masses. One of the biggest, complexities, I would say, not difficulties, one of the complexities of this religious system as prevalent in the Indian civilization is that it is very difficult to reach out to the masses in a language that they wanted to understand. And there are so many distortions because of the interpretations and misinterpretations. And the easy way of understanding this thing was not reaching to the masses, and how to make use of those canons, those precepts into practice in their day-to-day life. And Gandhi was the person, a great thinker, a philosopher, who was not an original thinker, who was not a great thinker, but the greatness of Gandhi lies in bringing and interpreting those things and putting forth before the masses to realize his objective of driving out the British colonialism. That is the beauty of Gandhi. One of the interesting things about Indian philosophy, Indian political thought, Indian thought religious thought is that no one is original. But having said that, because knowledge belongs to humanity, nobody else claims personality. With the impact of Western system, in Western methodology, we use, for a small word, we quote unquote give authentication. That's not part of Indian tradition, Indian civilization. Indian civilization abhors such kind of false identification and false ownership of knowledge. Knowledge emerges out of its own when people engage in the pursuit of it. Knowledge develops as the tree, the leaves to the trees. And a sense of ownership. Now we are talking about patents, copyrights, this, that. Because of this, so much of commercialization of knowledge. And Gandhiji was the person who did not own. He never said that this is my idea. Did not take the ownership of any of the philosophies that he propounded in his regular magazines, in his writings, in his books, in his speeches. He was the most inarticulate speaker. When he would speak, nobody would listen to him. Not audible, because at the time the mic system was not there. But when he slowly reaches out to the masses by transmitting the essence of the Indian thinking, it touches the core. And that's how Gandhi propagated the concept of non-violence in a more articulate way to negotiate and strategize with one of the mightiest powers in terms of military and political powers, not otherwise. Of course, economic power, but not otherwise. Because the power of knowledge, the power of civilization is definitely superior when it comes to Indian context. But that is, because of the subjugation, because of the domination, because of the hegemony. Today, this morning, we were discussing the hegemony. There was kind of blackening out of the essence of Indian civilization and its contribution to the body of knowledge. Anyway, I don't want to prolong, but a few sentences I will speak. So, is it relevant today? Is non-violence relevant today? Is Mahatma Gandhi relevant today in the 21st century? That is the billion-dollar question. Is the world different from the world that was in existence during Gandhi's time? Is the world different during Krishna's time, not Krishna's time, Yuvraj Krishna's time? No. The world is same. As a student of political science, I can quote the names of books in political science, wherein they say that the world has not changed. Warren changed the political order by Huntington, Samuel Huntington. The world has not changed because the conflicts, war, complexities, they do exist as they are. But the nature to negotiate with them changes, keeping in mind keeping in view the resources, the wherewithal. Now that the nuclear thing has come, now people are afraid of being attacked by nuclear weapons. That's why the deterrence, nuclear weapons as a deterrence, has really trying to transform the nature of thinking about the nature of the complexities of the world order or disorder of the world system. There are millions of questions, and definitely there is a craving amongst humanity for always peace. Conflict is there, but the craving for peace is there. And that craving is not through the means of non-violence, but not through the means of violence, but through the means of non-violence. We negotiate, we talk on the negotiating table only with the use of non-violence, not violence. When you come to the negotiating table, when we quarrel with China, when we quarrel with Pakistan, or when we have difficulties in Afghanistan, we ask them to come to the negotiating table wherein we do not use violence, but a means of non-violence. So non-violence is the key, is the weapon, is the system that would survive and persist through generations, and if the world is to survive, non-violence has to work. With this I stop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, it's a privilege to invite our guest speakers one by one. First of all, the historical perspective of non-violence. I request Professor Lalu Niyame Sailo to speak a few words, please.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sivaram, Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor J.P. Naik, Chairperson of the function, Professor Srinivas Party, my esteemed co-speakers, and dear colleagues and friends. Today I have been assigned to speak on the relevance of non-violence in the context of India's struggle for freedom and beyond. Now, this topic is a very fitting choice in view of the day, which is so significant in terms of international remembrance as well as for the national remembrance. Today is the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, and on which occasion the International Day of Non-Violence is also celebrated. And as we have already heard from our Vice Chancellor and Co-Vice Chancellor, Gandhi was the pioneer of the philosophy and strategy of non-violence. And here, before I go into the freedom struggle, I would like to briefly recapitulate for our remembrance how do we understand non-violence. And here the principle of non-violence, also known as non-violent resistance, rejects the use of physical violence in order to achieve social or political change. So this is very important. It does not necessarily mean that I'm non-violent and I'm doing nothing, with which I'm not going to achieve anything. But using the weapon of non-violence, people like Mahatma Gandhi and other Gandhians in the post-Second World War period were trying to achieve radical political and social changes. So, non-violence is often described as the politics of the common or ordinary people, and this form of social struggle has been adopted by mass populations, not only in India now, but all over the world, in campaigns for social and political justice. For example, in the United States in the 1960s, regarding the segregation, racial segregation of the black people and political oppressions that they have suffered, and also in South Africa because of apartheid, and also in the Soviet blocs like Czechoslovakia, and in the Philippines under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. So we have seen that this has been applied in different parts of the world. So we will briefly deal with that when we come to the non-violence beyond the context of Indian freedom struggle. Now, Mahatma Gandhi, who helped lead the Indian independence, has been the inspirations for non-violence and non-violent movements for civil rights and social changes across the world. And throughout his life, Gandhi remained committed to the principle of non-violence even under severe oppression and oppressive conditions, and also in a seemingly and difficult challenges. And so in the freedom struggle, after the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi in 1915, we have seen initially in a rather localized manner some non-violent protest movement starting from Champaran, and then also in the Rowlatt Satyagraha, where Gandhi was able to influence the people to challenge unjust laws and unjust oppressions, which the people have suffered for many years at the hands of the British colonial authorities. And so here in Champaran, for example, the indigo planters were subjected to harsh repressions. They were not allowed to cultivate their own food crops. They were forced to cultivate indigo. And then they were forced to sell at a very low price, so that maximum benefit can be obtained by the planters. So such unjust system, economic system and oppression was challenged by Gandhi through these non-violence agitations. And we have also seen in the non-cooperation movement the applications of non-violent tactics and methods like hartals, strikes, and boycott of British goods. It is not merely passive resistance, doing nothing, because without doing nothing you cannot resist the colonial authority. But selectively you chose to disobey that repressive government using non-violence as the means. And so throughout the non-cooperation movement, until it petered out after the Chauri Chaura incident, Gandhi was invoking the principle of non-violence to the people. And once when violence flared up, he had the guts to suspend it, because he realized that people have not yet been fully attuned themselves to the tenets of non-violence. And so again in 1930, in the civil disobedience movement and the Dandi March, Gandhi in a very significant way broke colonial repressive law which forbade the manufacturing of salt by any other Indian citizens other than the British government sanctioned people. So by breaking the salt law, Gandhi utilized non-violence as a tool to oppose and to resist the government and its economic system and its laws, which are unjustifiable to the people of India. And also in the subsequent period, we have seen that the non-violence, the application of non-violence and many of its tactics to resist the colonial oppressive government also had spontaneously created an avenue for Indians to pick up alternative economic activities, and also in educational aspects. Indian schools and colleges were started so that this will be in a way a challenge to the authority. because the challenge to the British authority was to be made very, very clear. And for that, Indians could not simply rely on the system that has been erected by the British government when it comes to education or economic arrangement. So that is where I would like to end my discussion on the context, the non-violence within the context of the Indian national movement. Now, beyond the Indian context, whether non-violence had its relevance is something that I would like to also add upon. Now, Gandhi's influence or the influence of Gandhi's teaching had been felt throughout the world, as I had briefly mentioned. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the stalwart of the civil rights movement in the United States, is a particularly notable example of the follower of Gandhian nonviolence. Blacks in the United States were oppressed by the white people even after they have been emancipated from slavery in 1865. So 100 years later, they were still oppressed socially, politically, and economically. So to fight against that, people like Martin Luther King Jr. adopted Gandhian nonviolence to challenge the white supremacists' political and economic oppressions. And I would like to quote Martin Luther King Jr. in his book, Strength to Love. In this book, he said that the whole Gandhian concept of Satyagraha was profoundly significant for me. And he said that if humanity is to progress, Gandhi is inescapable, unquote. And also in South Africa, the struggle by the African National Congress, the ANC, led by people like Nelson Mandela, against the apartheid government, which discriminated the black people. There was a very strong element of non-violence. Although there are some armed wing within the ANC, but usually the ANC main tenets, political strategy was the application of non-violence. And also in the Czechoslovakia, when it was invaded by Soviet Union, there was that resistance, non-violence resistance movement in 1968, which was severely repressed by the Soviet Union and its local collaborators. But ultimately in 1986, they have gained their freedom from the Soviet dominations, and likewise the Polish Solidarity Party, led by Lech Walesa, they have successfully challenged the communist government, which repressed the government. And in the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos had reigned for almost 10 years as the dictator, military dictator. And the people ultimately chose to resist using non-violence. And ultimately, the Marcos government finally gave in due to the instant and intense pressure from the people. So in that way, we can say that it is not only in India that Gandhian non-violence concept has been applied successfully. And this is why the United Nations have adopted today as the day for International Day for Non-Violence on the occasion of the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, and as our Pro-Vice Chancellor has mentioned, more than 140 nations have endorsed or sponsored the resolution. So it is very, very relevant to say that Gandhi and his philosophy of non-violence had a very, very far-reaching impact throughout the world, wherever there are oppressions and wherever people are subjected to unjust laws and oppressive system. So to end my speech, I would like to quote the writing of Mahatma Gandhi. Non-violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind, and it is the mightiest weapon devised by the ingenuity of man. Thank you.
And this was the silo, the Gandhian narrative, non-violent discourse with national, international examples. Your talk is brilliant and exceptional. Thank you so much. Now, it's my privilege to call upon Professor R.K. Mohanty to give the sociological dimension of non-violence. Professor Mohanty, please.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, revered Pro-Vice Chancellor, respected coordinator, respected co-panelists, invited professors, my dear colleagues, and the support staff around. My best wishes and greetings on the day of International Day of Non-Violence, when we remember Gandhiji and the Shastri. I have been given to talk on sociological implications of this particular concept. I think I will supplement the discussions made so far if there is a sociological implication somewhere within, then I will be the best person. So I ask myself, I am curious and ambitious, to ask myself three important questions which I must answer to meet the logical end of the demand of the meeting today. The first question is, how much or have we really appreciated the true changing meaning of the concept of non-violence? Is it as simple as you say non-violence, or is there anything more than the etymological or narrative meaning of the concept of non-violence? The second question that I want to ask myself, what are the difficulties in accomplishing non-violence, which is championed in your country, but also has spread it throughout the globe, as Bunur has said? Then, are the challenges possible to meet? What is the future of non-violence? These are the three things, and you may call it sociological. And there are a lot of difficulties. Many terms are there which have never remained harmless, and non-violence is one of them. It has its generic meaning, it has its specific meaning as well. So the first question is, would there to concept whether it is non-violence, two words joined by hyphen, or a single word. If a distinction is made to that effect, then true meaning of non-violence can be understood. Non-violence basically means, as Kunur has said, abstinence from any form of harm or injury caused to the person, individual, physic, psyche or otherwise. Undue victimization, undue injury and abstinence from causing harm to others is non-violence. That is a generic meaning, but the specific meaning of non-violence as a single word, to my understanding and culture, is different. It's a huge concept. Tolerance is one such concept, very important. In literature it is also said that converting something like an wound to wisdom is a non-violence. Non-violence is also in specific terminologies described as something where there is a moral imposition to all forms of immoralities. In that sense, not being kind when kindness is due is not under the purview of non-violence. I don't call it violence, not non-violence either. So therefore, Mahatma Gandhi himself has said that non-violence is a science. It is achieved and accomplished with difficulties. So therefore, non-violence is not a concept of mere advocacy. Non-violence is a concept of diligent practice, howsoever difficult it may be to practice it. And there are two important ways how we can connote or denote the concept of non-violence. One is its principled aspects, another is the pragmatic aspect. The principled aspect, when carried much forward beyond necessity, then non-violence loses its originality. Taliban. So one such example. Honorable Pope VC was giving the example of religion. In fact, the greatest blunder would be if we can associate violence with the concept of religion. No religion, whether Indic or European, whatever religion, really teaches this. There are ways out as to how we really try to look at these whole issues. Principle is as to I go by my belief, I go by my commitments, I go by my what the country demands from principle. Pragmatic. Is it practicable? There critics come in. You do not want violence to be there, but somewhere some form of violence becomes a necessity which ultimately verbalized as non-violence. I'll give you two examples of this. It is violence, but in its true meaning, content, nature and nuances, it's not violent. Police encounter is one such example, where what do they try to do? When there is the issue of self-defense, will you go on to suggest that you will behave like Gandhi there? So you will face for another slap? So therefore, they kill and they eliminate the evil from the contingency type of situations in that particular sense. You know, some other critics have also tried to argue that non-violence is a saintly concept which can be used by saints, good for propagation, difficult to practice. I don't know how much sociological I am going, but this is how I try to cook up my argument to make some sense about it. They say it's difficult to practice a saintly activity, isn't it? And they try to suggest that it requires tolerance, it requires perseverance, it involves difficulties, it involves courage, it involves so many things so difficult to accomplish in the day-to-day life. Similarly, they also go on to challenge Gandhi and say that Gandhi was not 100% in favor of non-violence. When Gandhi propagated the Bible principles, that episode 1, 27 to 31, nail for nail, tooth for tooth, isn't it? Whenever it is necessary for self-defense, then probably there will be use of violence, but in its true nature, in its true character, in its true spirit, it will be taken as non-violence. So therefore, one should look at the pragmatic dimensions and principled dimensions, and principled dimensions beyond necessity, beyond societal requirement, then there arises a problem with regard to this particular thing. What is the problem? Or what are the difficulties? The second question that I wanted to ask. What is the difficulty in accomplishing non-violence? Yes. Modernity has been most notorious in advancing some form of violence as one abnormal form of division of labor, characterized by organic solidarity, where differentiation becomes more, then people try to differentiate from each other, inequality increases, discrimination also increases. So discrimination, exploitation, these are the other concepts also which will not come under the purview of non-violence. There are also victimizations without victims. There, under such circumstances, it becomes very difficult to accomplish this process. Where the modernity become problematic, our faith has been troubled. Tradition has lost its way. Individual judgment has been freed from all forms of collective insights. Then, under such circumstances, only despair spreads around. Despair is no indication of non-violence in that sense. No, more individualistic you become, more choices you exercise, you do not know your action may terminate in either violence or some of its allied forms in some form or the other. Why does it happen? It happens because of the modern human nature. There is no semblance among our actions, our thinking, and also our verbalization. What is the problem? The problem is we do not say the things that we do. We do not do the things that we say. And sometimes there is a problem when we say the things and do the things, but in our heart of hearts, that is not there in our mind. If this is the type of situation, then expecting tolerance would be difficult, and its manifestation shall be a problem. And therefore, what I am trying basically to suggest that the concept of non-violence as such in its modern connotations has expanded its scope and increased its boundaries over a period of time, which is to be appreciated and properly accomplished individual critique apart. And there, why do I say that it has spread global all over the globe? Because Punur has given such examples of Czechoslovakia. Poland is one such example. Czechoslovakia was 1989 that independence. It is beginning, but that is called Velvet Revolution or Gentle Revolution. Similarly, Dalai Lama Sani Tibet would have been included also. Filipinos, isn't it? Then apartheid, who have taken such names, Martin Luther King Jr. Several people have been influenced by this, and this Indian champion is getting gradually a global character. But the difficulty is the third question: what is the future? As long as our faith is troubled and our wisdom is at stake, circumstantial necessities turn the society to be different, then probably it will be difficult to accomplish such our concept of non-violence. I thank the coordinator for thinking me fit to rise to this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mohanty has interwoven theory and practice, philosophy and pragmatism, thought, words and action in the sociological matrix. He has done justice to the topic. Thank you very much. अभी मैं आग्रह करूंगा तो संजय कुमार जी से वो अपने वक्तव्य रखें।
बात कर रहे हैं
सर,
कहाँ बात जा रहे हैं
कहीं नहीं सर, ये आदरणीय कुलपति महोदय, आदरणीय प्रतिकुल पति महोदय, मित्रों, आज के इस पावन दिवस पर महात्मा गांधी और पंडित लाल बहादुर शास्त्री के श्री चरणों में अपना श्रद्धा सुमन अर्पित करते हुए मैं अपनी बात शुरू करूंगा। लेकिन दुर्भाग्य से मैं जो पेपर लाना चाहता था मैं कुछ और उठा लाया हूँ। खैर, मैं शुरू करूंगा अपनी बात सर इकबाल की पंक्तियों से। सारे जहाँ से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा, उसमें आगे चलेंगे उस गीत में। तो सर इकबाल ने लिखा है कि सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जहाँ हमारा, कुछ बात है कि हंसते मिटते नहीं हैं। अब इस गीत पर अगर गौर करें तो दो तीन चीज़ें बहुत स्पष्ट आपको दिखाई दें कि भारतीय सभ्यता प्राचीनतम है। दूसरा कि सदियों तक हमारे दुश्मन रहे हैं, और वो दुश्मन जिन्होंने हिंसा से हमें पराजित करना चाहा। लेकिन हमारी सभ्यता और संस्कृति में कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें थी जिसने हमें बचाई, और वो चीज में जो भी हमने हमारे पूर्वजों ने खोजा है धर्म संस्कृति के विकास के दौरान, उसमें एक अहिंसा थी। अहिंसा परमो धर्म, परहित सरस धर्म नहीं भाई, और इस तरह की, और वसुधैव कुटुंबकम का नारा कि पूरा विश्व एक परिवार है, कुल के रूप में हम लेते हैं, देखते हैं। भारतीय परंपरा और चिंतन मनीषा में अगर आप देखेंगे तो ईसा से 500-600 साल पहले से अहिंसा की ध्वनि भारतीय सभ्यता और संस्कृति में सुनाई देने लगती है। सनातन हिंदू धर्म में यज्ञ में बड़े पैमाने पर बलि प्रथा होती थी, परिणाम से उसके उलट बौद्ध धर्म और जैन धर्म आते हैं और वो अहिंसा को परमो धर्म मानकर चलते हैं। जैन धर्म में अहिंसा परमो धर्म घोषित होती है, बुद्ध ने भी अहिंसा को सर्वप्रिय माना है। अष्टांग मार्ग में जाकर के सम्यक व्यवहार पर उनका जोर है कि उचित क्या है, अनुचित क्या है और जो उचित है वही करना चाहिए। सवाल है कि हिंसा क्या है। किसी के प्रति व्यवहारिक रूप से कर्म के आधार पर कुछ करना हिंसा है, लेकिन केवल इतने तक अपने को सीमित मत कीजिए कि शारीरिक आघात पहुंचाने तक। मनसा वाचा कर्मणा, अगर किसी भी जीव को अहित पहुंचाने के लिए अगर आप कुछ करते हैं तो वो हिंसा है। और उसके उलट अगर आप मानव मात्र के कल्याण के लिए, जीव मात्र के उत्थान के लिए, उसकी भलाई के लिए कुछ भी करते हैं तो वो अहिंसा है। और हमारे मनीषी इस बात पर हमेशा जोर देते रहे हैं कि सबके हित और कल्याण की चिंता करें। हमारे प्रतिकुलपति सर जो भारतीय परंपरा की तरफ संकेत कर रहे थे, वो धर्म से वाबस्त नहीं होता है। हमारे भारतीय सभ्यता और संस्कृति में ये चीज़ हमें सिखाई गई है। हम सीखते हैं कि मानव मात्र के प्रति, जीव मात्र के प्रति हम अहिंसक हों, उनके हित और उत्थान के लिए कार्य करें। और इसीलिए आप देखिएगा कि हम लोगों के परिवारों में सिखाया जाता है कि अगर खाना बने तो पहली रोटी जानवर के लिए, गाय के लिए निकालिए। ये अहिंसा है। राह चलते आप देखेंगे किसी को कि चींटियों को दाना देते हैं, अहिंसा है। चिड़ियों के लिए खाने और पीने के लिए सामान रखना अहिंसा है। सो हमारी ट्रेनिंग भारतीय परंपरा में इसी तरह की रही है और जिसकी शुरुआत प्राचीन काल से होती रही है। प्राचीन काल से हमारे चिंतक ऋषि मनीषी इस पर चिंतन करते रहे हैं, हमें मार्गदर्शन करते रहे हैं। लेकिन याद रखिए कि हर व्यक्ति मात्र में देव और दानव छुपा होता है, सत्य और असत्य होता है। हमारे अपने स्वार्थ जब बढ़ जाते हैं तब हम दूसरों को अहित करने लगते हैं, वो हिंसा हो जाती है। और जब हम सबके कल्याण और उत्थान की बात सोचने लगते हैं तो वो अहिंसक रूप होता है। सबके हित को लेकर के आगे बढ़ना, वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की भावना को लेकर आगे चलना, ये अपने आप में अहिंसक होना है। मैं 2-3 उदाहरण आपके सामने रखूंगा, आप लोग उससे परिचित होंगे। आप याद कीजिए, लोग कहते हैं कि एक ज़माना था कि 5वीं-6वीं शताब्दी में फारस नाम का एक देश हुआ करता था जहाँ पर सूर्य उपासक लोग होते थे, यज्ञ किया करते थे। लेकिन मोहम्मद साहब के जन्म के बाद पूरे अरब और पश्चिम एशिया में जो इस्लाम की आंधी आई, उसने बड़े बड़े देशों को उखाड़ फेंका और फारस में भी यही हुआ। पारसी लोग वहाँ से भागे, शरण उन्हें कहीं नहीं मिली। आकर के गुजरात और महाराष्ट्र में उन्हें शरण मिली। वो भारत था जिसने उन्हें शरण दी। वो अहिंसक रूप था। लेकिन आज ईरान में जाके देखिए, पारसी धर्म को मानने वाले एक भी लोग नहीं। एक दूसरा उदाहरण और दूंगा। द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध के दौरान लोग कहते हैं जब हिटलर ने पोलैंड पर आक्रमण किया और वहाँ से द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध की शुरुआत हुई, तो पोलैंड के सैनिकों ने अपने 500 महिलाओं और 200 बच्चों को एक जहाज पर चढ़ाया और उसके कप्तान को सिर्फ ये निर्देश दिया कि दुनिया में जहाँ भी आपको शरण मिले आप वहाँ चले जाइए। अगर हम जिंदा रहे और आप जिंदा रहे तो हम मिलेंगे। आप जान करके आश्चर्यचकित होंगे कि पोलैंड से लेकर भूमध्य सागर पार करते हुए वो आगे बढ़ते आए, किसी भी अरब कंट्री ने उनको शरण नहीं दी। भारत आए, गुजरात में जामनगर के वहाँ के शासक ने, महाराज ने उन्हें शरण दी। 9 साल तक वो यहाँ रहे। उन बच्चों की शिक्षा की व्यवस्था उन्होंने की। बाद में द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध की समाप्ति के बाद 9 साल के बाद वो वापस अपने देश गए आज भी सम्मान के साथ पोलैंड में इस कार्य को याद किया जाता है, भारतीयों को याद किया जाता है। ये अहिंसा का एक और रूप है। जैसा मैंने कहा कि प्राचीन काल से हमारे यहाँ अहिंसा एक नीति की तरह, एक धर्म की तरह, एक कृत्य की तरह, जो मनुष्य मात्र को उत्थान की तरफ, उदात्तावस्था की तरफ, देवत्व की तरफ ले जाता है, रही है। लेकिन आप जानते हैं कि औद्योगिक क्रांति के बाद यूरोपियन शक्तियों ने हिंसा के आधार पर पूरे विश्व को रौंद दिया। भारत हो या एशिया के दूसरे देश हों, अफ्रीका हो और लैटिन अमेरिका और अमेरिकी देश हो, सबको गुलाम बनाया। वो हिंसा के आधार पर बनाया गया था। वैसे में महात्मा गांधी जैसे एक संत आते हैं जो भारतीय परंपरा, चिंतन परंपरा से अहिंसा, सत्य और सत्याग्रह और शांति को लेकर के एक नीतिगत रूप से एक राजनीति में उसका प्रवेश कराते हैं और पूरे भारतीय जनता को संगठित करके अंग्रेजों का विरोध करते हैं, राष्ट्रीय स्वतंत्रता आंदोलन की लड़ाई लड़ते हैं। पर ध्यान रखिएगा कि ये उनकी अपनी मजबूरी भी थी और अंदर का आत्मबल भी था, भारतीय परंपरा का चिंतन बल भी था। मजबूरी ये थी कि शस्त्र के आधार पर, हथियारों के आधार पर हम ब्रिटिश साम्राज्य का मुकाबला नहीं कर सकते थे। ये वो ब्रिटिश साम्राज्य था जिसके पूरे साम्राज्य में कभी भी सूरज अस्त नहीं होता था। अगर कहीं सूर्योदय होता था तो कहीं सूर्यास्त, और जहाँ सूर्यास्त होता था कहीं और साम्राज्य के कोने में सूर्योदय हो चुका था। उतने बड़े साम्राज्य से आप हथियार से तो नहीं लड़ सकते। सो इसलिए उन्होंने शांति, सत्य और अहिंसा और सत्याग्रह को आधार बनाया। जैसा कि सर कह रहे थे, वो संघ भारतीयों को जोड़ा, अंग्रेजों का विरोध किया और हमें उसी अहिंसा के आधार पर हमें मिली, आज़ादी मिली। मैं वो गीत लिख कर आया था, एक फिल्म का गीत है, आपने सुना होगा कि दे दी मुझे आज़ादी, बिना खड़क बिना ढाल, साबरमती के संत तूने कर दिया कमाल। ये महात्मा गांधी के महत्व को दर्शाता है, ये अहिंसा के महत्व को दर्शाता है। और जैसा कि हमारे पूर्व वक्ता ने भी कहा, मार्टिन लूथर किंग हो और नेल्सन मंडेला हो, इवन म्यांमार की आंग सान सू की हो, अपने अपने देशों में हिंसा से और एक हिंसक सरकार से वो लड़ती रही हैं, अपने और अपने लोगों के हितार्थ, अपने कल्याणार्थ। सर ने एक और सवाल उठाया था कि आज क्या हिंसा की कोई उपयोगिता, अहिंसा की कोई उपयोगिता है? आप सब गवाह हैं पिछले 1.5 महीने का, और ख़ास करके 14 अगस्त 15 अगस्त का। आप याद कीजिए अफगानिस्तान में तालिबान 15 अगस्त को रातों रात चंद लोगों के द्वारा हथियार और हिंसा के बल पर पूरे अफगानिस्तान पर कब्जा कर लिया जाता है। पता नहीं आपके दिल दिमाग पर उसका क्या प्रभाव पड़ा, मैं तो बहुत दुखी था। और डेली उस दौरान जो सीन आते थे, आप याद कीजिए, राष्ट्रपति भवन का पहला सीन आया, हथियार लेकर के राष्ट्रपति भवन में बैठे हुए थे आतंकवादी तालिबानी। संसद भवन का सीन आया, जो पहला सीन आया था, हथियार के साथ अध्यक्ष की कुर्सी पर वो बैठे हुए थे। जो पहला प्रसारण किया उन्होंने मीडिया से, जो इंटरव्यू हो रहा था, उसके पीछे हथियारबंद आतंकवादी खड़े थे। आप याद कीजिए उड़ता हुआ वो जहाज जिस पर से अफगानी लटके हुए थे और बेचारे गिरकर मर रहे थे। आप याद कीजिए वो भी दृश्य जिसमें अफगानिस्तान से भागते हुए ईरान की तरफ हजारों की भीड़ दिखाई दे रही थी, पहाड़ पर नंगे पैर चढ़ रहे थे, दौड़ रहे थे सुरक्षा के लिए, हिंसा से बचने के लिए। सो आज भी इस विश्व में अहिंसा की जरूरत है। अहिंसा से ही हम हिंसा का सामना कर सकते हैं। पर क्या ये अहिंसा कायर होनी चाहिए? जैसे अफगानिस्तान में किया लोगों ने, मुझे दुख है ये कहते हुए कि 2 करोड़ से ऊपर की लगभग आबादी, पता नहीं 50,000 70,000 जितने भी तालिबानी हों, उनके सामने सरेंडर कर गए। क्या उन्हें कर जाना चाहिए? और अब पूरी जिंदगी और आगे पता नहीं कब तक वो हिंसा की मार झेलते रहे। आप याद कीजिए महिलाओं पर हिंसा की इतनी बड़ी गाज गिरी है अफगानिस्तान में कि उन्हें घर से निकलने की इजाज़त नहीं है, उन्हें अपनी आंख भी दिखाने की इजाज़त नहीं है। पढ़ना लिखना छोड़ दीजिए, नौकरी करना छोड़ दीजिए, अकेले बाहर निकलना मुश्किल। ये सभी हिंसा के अलग अलग विविध रूप हैं। सो वैसे में कायर होकर के अगर आप किसी के चरणों में गिर जाएं, किसी हथियारबंद के चरणों में गिर जाएं, तो ये अहिंसा नहीं। आपको लड़ना होगा, खड़ा होना होगा, क्योंकि जब आप मजबूत होते हैं तभी अहिंसा का कोई मतलब है। दिनकर की पंक्तियां मैं लिख लाया था, वो भी छूटी हुई है, लेकिन 2 पंक्तियां याद है कि क्षमा सोगती उस भुजंग को जिसके पास गरज। वरना आप कितने उदार हैं, विनयी हैं, अहिंसक हैं, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है। जब आप ताकतवर होंगे और जब आप कमजोर पर दया भाव रखेंगे, सहानुभूति रखेंगे, उनके उत्थान और कल्याण की बात करेंगे, तब उसका कोई मतलब है। वरना लुटेरे और हत्यारों के सामने झुक जाना अहिंसा नहीं है। आज भी इसलिए महात्मा गांधी की नीति अहिंसा जरूरी है, पर दिनकर की वो पंक्तियां याद रखिएगा कि क्षमा सोगती उस बुजुर्ग को जिसके पास है। आपने मुझे मौका दिया,
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद संजय जी. In one sentence I can translate. He told, the whole world is my extended family. वसुधैव कुटुंबकम. क्योंकि वो हिंदी में अपना वक्तव्य रखा. मैं एक पंक्ति दोहराना चाहता हूँ नरसिंह मेहता जी की, जो गांधी जी का बहुत प्रिय भजन आपको याद होगा. वैष्णव जन तेने कहिए जो पीर पराई जाने रहे. That person is close to God, who knows the suffering of others. What else can be non-violent? बहुत धन्यवाद. Thank you so much. Last but not least, our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. S. Shyam Kishore, he will deal with the topic from non-violence as on the political tools. Dr. Shyam Kishore, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir. Respected Vice Chancellor, respected Pro Vice Chancellor, for giving me the opportunity. I should thank the Chair also. Actually, whatever I was thinking to speak, half of them is already done. So I think I don't know whether I should be very happy or I should be like a little bit the same.
No problem.
But anyway, actually I'm given the topic of non-violence as a political tool and a means of attaining peaceful goals. So whenever we think or whenever we think of Mahatma Gandhi, 2 words comes always in our mind. That is the truth and non-violence. Because he was one of the staunch believers in these 2 philosophy or ideals or principles. Maybe we will call it ideals or we will call it principle. I am not coming with the meaning and all everybody has already talked about, but briefly, when we talk about the non-violence, simple and the simplest meaning, or in a layman's term, like it's just abstaining from the use of physical force to achieve an aim. But if we look at it, it is we can interpret or we can understand in 3 ways again. Like we can understand non-violence as a philosophy. We can also understand as a principle and as a practice. Say for example, if we look at a philosophical angle, so I've also already addressed some of the issues. Ethically, or ethical philosophy, it upholds the view and moral behaviors exclude the use of violence. As a political philosophy, it maintains that violence is a self-perpetuating and can never provide a means to a securely peaceful end. As a principle, it supports the pacifist position that war and killing are never justifiable. It cannot be justified. As a practice, this is very important. It has been used by many to achieve social change or express resistance to oppressions. Regarding the political and all, many people has already talked about, but let me briefly again rewind and then let me go back to the contemporary issues. Like Gandhi used the non-violence, as I also said, as a weapon to win over the colonial powers and get freedom. Krishna Kripalani said that Gandhi was the first in human history to extend the principle of non-violence from the individual to social and political plans. After Gandhi, we have witnessed many people, many leaders, even the civil society organizations use non-violence as an instrument, as a mechanism, as a tool, or as a weapon, whatever term you use it, to achieve their goals. Say, we have already mentioned like Martin Luther King, then the Nelson Mandela, we have already talked. So I'm not coming with that. But there are issues, but there are things which is left out, will be out. Say, for example, Martin Luther King. When Martin Luther King talked about this non-violence, he also interpreted in his own manner. He come out with say 6 notions or the 6 key principles of non-violence. Say number 1, he said, one can resist evils without resorting to violence. Number 1. Second, he said, non-violence seeks to win the friendship and understanding of the opponent, not to humiliate him. It means we have to understand in a very friendly and understanding manner. Third, very important, he said, evil itself should be opposed, not the person or the people committing the evil act. Then fourth, he said, committed to violence must be willing to suffer
Yes.
without retaliations, as suffering itself can be retributive.
Correct.
Then fifthly, he said, non-violence messages avoid external physical violence and internal violence of spirit as well. And I quote, the non-violent resistance should only refuse to shoot his opponent, but he also refused to hate him. It means basically love is very, very important here. The idea of love is becoming very, very important here. The last one, he said, the non-violent resistor must have a deep faith in the future, with the conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. These are the 6 principles he tried to interpret or redefine in his own understanding of non-violence. And accordingly, he tried to do his own movement, as we have already heard. And then, because of his mass protest and then the famous speech he made in the Washington DC, I have a dream. After that, because of this, his powerful movement, or the movement, he inspired many people. It was reported that around 250,000 were on that particular fateful day in the Washington DC, when he gave his famous speech of this thing, I have a dream. After that, the United States or US Congress was forced to change the law or come up with a new law, that is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Because of this totally changed the idea of the black. So because of his contributions toward the black American black and the black as a whole in the world, he was given the Nobel Peace Prize on the same year. Then coming to the South Africa again, I will not come with that, but Nelson Mandela, and then before Nelson Mandela, I think I should mention this particular person like Albert Luthuli, who was leading the African National Congress ahead of Nelson Mandela. He was the person who was leading the Indian African National Congress when Nelson Mandela joined, when he attained the age of 26. And after that, that was in 1952. Then after 10 years, Nelson Mandela was controlling the organization. But at that point of time, Nelson Mandela was kept or imprisoned for another 27 years. Then become the history. He was released in 1988. Then after that, he became the first black in South Africa in 1994. 93, yeah. 94 he was given the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the history. Then let me jump to the contemporary part. Sir was asking whether it is relevant, but it's still lingering or still continuing the movement. Say, if we remember the 2011, the famous Arab Spring, if we recall. See, actually it started in 2010, December, in Tunisia. The pro-democracy movement that took place in the Middle East, and then it spread up to the even North Africa to the Middle East. Tunisia is the Africa side, so the Tunisia, then North Africa, then Middle East. In the last part of the December 2010, started with, then it continues up to August, September of the 2011, which is popularly known as Arab Spring, challenging some of the region's authoritarian regime. The movement began with the protests in Tunisia and then crossed to the Egypt and toppled their regime in quick succession, inspiring similar attempts in other Arab countries. Actually, this is the scenario. I'm not coming very like detail. What does it show actually? Actually, this shows that this kind of uprising is also a kind of the peaceful protest. They are unarmed protesters. They don't have arms, or even this is not a kind of somebody who lead. Actually, it's a kind of a spontaneous kind of a thing. So this uprising also demonstrated to the world that the true nature of political power, even if it is very strong, one is supported by the Americans, the most powerful countries of the world. Even if it is supported by the most powerful countries of the world, it cannot survive if the people are not cooperating with the government. So, what I'm trying to say is, the contemporary world, when I say contemporary, I mean the last 10-15 years, people are still using. And it's not only in the other part, we're talking only other part. What about in India? Say, when it comes to India, say, one thing which reminds back is about, say, Anna Hazare, say, for example. The India Against Corruption movement in 2011. We cannot sideline this particular, though it's a little bit political colors are there, here and there. There are different arguments on it. But many people also regarded Anna Hazare as the Gandhi of the 21st century. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, there's a very different story. Some will agree, some will not, but that is as her said, critics are there. We have critics. But actually, he is a kind of a living, Kantian kind of a person, even though, as I'm saying, there are political colors, who advocate non-violent mechanism as a social movement. From political, now it is turning toward the social movement, and in some others people are taking the weapons in order to be free or to make some change in the law. So his non-violence, though as Pungura was saying, like very aggressive, though it's very kind of very low profile but very aggressive, Gandhi-like method of protest together with his anti-corruption cause struck a chord with Indians at that point of time. Lakhs of people were joining hands and everybody was identified as Anna. We are all Anna, I'm also Anna like that. Hum bhi Anna hai, that's a slogan at that point of time. What does it mean? It means even today people are still used and people are using in a very effective manner. While saying effective manner, with that movement is not like 1 year, 2 years, it's not like, it's not very long. But it's very effective in the sense that the government at that point of time, headed by Dr. Manmohan Singh, they are forced to change or forced to take serious steps to tackle corruption, including resignation of our high-profile union ministers. So some of the key issues that the anti-corruption movement highlighted were the need for strong anti-corruption measures. Even electoral reforms were pointed out, political representatives with clean criminal records and political accountability. And most of this, no doubt, Anna Hazare campaign was based on the demand for a strong Lok Dal, which could take against the highest government officials. And at that point of time, our Prime Minister was the Chief Minister of Gujarat at that point of time. He started tweeting at that point of time, started his political campaign also side by side. Let me quote two things which I think is very important. One, he said, I quote, the past and the present prove the fact that non-violence is in the DNA of Indians. And another one, he said, for many of us who didn't witness the independence struggle, anti-corruption movement reinforced confidence in the strength of non-violence. At the time he started his political campaign also, but the way he expressed at that point of time, it's I think still relevant. Then coming from the mainland toward the northeast, nobody has touched, so I'm just a little bit on my mind. So actually, when it comes to the northeast is known for the non-violence. Practically, violence is what many people believe. People don't want to come because of insurgency. Though insurgency or a different term, Naxalite in the central India. But people are more decided because this is periphery also. One thing, periphery. So here also, people were using violent means. Just before the day of independence, NNC, Naga National Council declared independence. Then the Naga Hills is declared as a distant areas. Government negotiated. Then such negotiation is also part of the peaceful means. Government were using both. They were using both. Then in Mizoram also, we have witnessed violence as well as non-violence. When the MNF movement started in 1965, actually the MNF started at that one time. So the groundwork, everything started in the mid-60s. Then actually the real violence was more or less stopped in the mid-70s. Negotiations started in the late 70s. From the late 70s onward till the mid-80s, there was no firing from both sides. Negotiation was going on in full swing. As a product of that negotiations, as both sides agreed the non-violence or the peaceful resolutions of the conflict within the framework of the constitution, the MNF agreed, or both sides agreed in a more better manner. Both sides agreed to resolve the crisis, and they resolved. This is what I want to say, a part of the Indian philosophy, a part of the process of the non-violent technique, or a means. And not only here, I also remember from my state, say for example, Janin Sarmila, who had a hunger strike for 16 years. It doesn't matter whether she wins or not, there's a very different story. But a woman, a lady, who witnessed the massacres of around 12 people, some people report 10 and 12, maybe on that day, fateful day, it seems 10 were died on the spot, later 2 died. So 12 people were died on a bus stand when the Assam Rifle fired. Actually, it's a kind of accident in the sense, a truck tire was tossed out. Out of fear, Assam Rifle just fired all around. As a result of that, 10 people died on the spot, 2 died later on. That was, if I remember correctly, November 2nd, 2000. She started a hunger strike after 2 days, that is on the 4th November 2000. Continue another 16 years, ended in 2016 only. It is against the Armed Forces Special Part Act. Her demand is to remove or to repeal Armed Forces Special Power Act 1951, amended 56 and 74. That is her demand. So what I'm trying to say is, people are individually or as a group, people are using the non-violent means. Or even if I bring back to Mizoram, say for example again, say recently we have witnessed the agitations, particularly in 2018, when the Chief Electoral Officers of Mizoram, S.V. Sasank, when there was issues with the people,
Yeah.
or we can say with the government itself. So the NGO Coordinating Committee, the Apex Body of Civil Society, Student Organization of Mizoram, they demanded that Sasank should be transferred outside the state. That was in the first week of November 2018. So thousands of people, there are different reports, I don't know, on that particular, that I was at home. But one of my students, when I called up and asked, actually what is the condition, how many people, they said, I don't maybe around 20, 30, but if you count all over Mizoram, it may comes lakhs like that. But there's no proper record, but let's say at least thousands of people were on the street. So thousands of Mizo took on the street in Aizawl demanding for the removal of the state chief election officers. Ultimately, the government, or actually the election commission, removed S.V. Sasank and replaced him by Ashish Kundra. So what I'm trying to say is, till now we have witnessed the use of non-violent means in a different form. Well, in the beginning I was saying like practice. Many people are still practice as an individual, as a group. So I think that there is no question of the relevant or irrelevant. People are practicing. People are still practice in one form or other. As Sir Sanjay was talking about, if I understand correctly, even fitting to the birds and all is a part of that. Then, so coming with all these ideas, and people are practiced in a different form. Maybe the idea of non-violent may be redefined or defined in their own understanding, but it is still moving on with the idea of that, the idea of non-violent as a weapon or as a tool, as a mechanism, as an instrument to achieve their goals, their desirable goals. So I think still the idea of non-violence is still moving, and I think it will move on. It's going to carry forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sam Kishore. Refreshingly different, interspersed with legacy of freedom struggle to contemporary relevant examples. Thank you very much. Esteemed colleagues, now it is time, we thought 1 hour, now it is more than 1 hour 30 minutes. So the issue, just I will take a cue from the last thing and wind up with a vote of thanks. When the question comes, non-violence, what next? Ropuliani, the Mizo chieftainess who fought, didn't succumb to the pressure, died in Chittagong Hills jail. Aung San Suu Kyi was in jail, came out, fought for democracy and freedom, again went inside prison. And Iram Sharmila, I was wondering why Dr. Sam Kishore is forgetting Iram Sharmila. So should I tell it? But good, he spoke about it. 16 years, and in Guinness World Record, it is written one of the longest running non-violent struggles around the world is by Iram Sharmila of Manipur, India.
Yes.
That is it. World record. So the question is, what happened, what is happening, and in future? We have won and lost many battles with violence, but the war of non-violence continues. The legacy continues. No Gandhi. Many Gandhians are gone, but Gandhiji, the philosophy, the eternal values are still there. We had only one Lal Bahadur Shastri. Many are there in different parts of India and the world in the line of non-violence, working for the people, grassroots level worker, unsung heroes of this world, and they are the torch bearers of non-violence. Thank you very much from bottom of my heart. On behalf of organizers, our university, I thank very much Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Pro Vice Chancellor Sir, esteemed speakers. They were so different, fantastic. Even I can vouch that in recent years, I have not been witnessing any such meeting where four speakers in time fantastically refreshing, all are different from each other, and dear participants, because without you is meaningless. So I thank you all, I am grateful to you all, thank you very much. Namaste.